All right, so we'll begin. We're holding the beginning of Siman Tzadik Tes, a new Siman. And what's interesting about the beginning of the new Siman is that the Mechaber seems to be, even though he follows the tour for the most part, there is a connection between the end of Siman Tzadik Tes and the beginning of Siman Tzadik Tes. What would be the connection? Towards the end of Siman Tzadik Tes, we spoke about a very unique situation where you have Isurim Mevatim Zeh apparently, of the Chelev and the Dam getting mixed in with 59 heter, canceling each other out, and a lot of Chidushim are related to that Seif. Here in Siman Tzadik Tes Seif Aleph, we'll be talking about a similar situation. We want to know what the status is of the bones. As the Mechaber defines the Siman, Din ha'atzomos mitztarfin levatel isur. We want to know the status, the din of bones, if they are mitztarf, if they can be used in conjunction with the heter to be mevatel isur. So again, we're talking about bittul. We're talking about bittul of something unique, not an isur in itself per se. Nevertheless, it is related to the isur. We want to figure out what the halacha is by atzomos. And of course, there will be another halacha of shelo levatel isur lechatchila later on. So here, we're going to try to discuss what is exactly the status of bones, which takes us to the Gemara, Maseches Chulin. There's a whole discussion there about Zerah B'Shela. The discussion there about Zerah B'Shela deals with where we learn the shi'urim from, and how much is the shi'ur of bittul. And the two man de'amrim who discuss shi'urim, they both agree that we learn it out from Zerah B'Shela. Zerah B'Shela seems to imply that something is going on there that is not 100% right. Nevertheless, it's okay. It's mutter. And what is that? You're cooking, depending how you learn the Gemara, depending according to which man de'amrim, you're cooking the zerah, which has to be removed, the forearm, right? This is, we're talking about the korban of the Nazir. That has to be removed, given to the Kohen. Is still being cooked together with the whole ayil, the whole animal, according to the way you should learn the sugya. And it's okay. It's okay that they're even cooked together. According to, of course, one opinion, you first cut it, and then you still cook it in the same pot. Either way, however you learn it, there's something that it cannot be eaten by us that is being cooked in the same pot. But there's enough to be mevatel the tam of the Zerah B'Shela. There's enough to be mevatel the Isser. How much is that? Either shishim or 100. Because there's two opinions in that Gemara, whether you need bitul by shishim or whether you need bitul by 100. And here we're talking about tam. Right?
The cases where it's not separated. The cases of the Zerah, the four...
They're together.
The four,
right. Also, you still have the required amount in the rest of the ayil to be mevatel the Zerah B'Shela. One says it's 60, the other one says it's 100. Is it 60 or is it 100? They're both correct. Because the one who learns 60, he says you combine the bones. The bones of the Zerah and the bones of the rest of the ayil. And if you look at bones and meat, then you have 60 in the rest of the ayil keneged the bones and meat of the Zerah. The one who says 100 says, I'm also right. I don't look at the bones. I ignore the bones. And if I ignore the bones, guess what? I have 100. 100? Yes, because the Zerah happens to be a very large bone. It happens to have a lot more bone than meat. And therefore, if you compare the rest of the ayil and you ignore bones, then you have the shear of 100 keneged the Basar of the Zerah. All right. That's basically the difference between the 60 and the 100. Now, what's the real machlokes here? The real machlokes apparently is not just shi'urim. Apparently there's something else going on there. After all, one is combining bones and one is not. Well, the one that combines the bones holds, well, I need to combine, I need to consider the bones because there is plita and blia, right? There's something coming out of the bones and something being absorbed into bones. Bones is absorbable. Bones can let out, can emit flavors too. So the one who obviously considers the bones in his shear is obviously saying, listen, bones are to be reckoned with. You know, they have blia and they have plita. And the one who says, no, I'm not going to consider the bones, obviously what is he saying? That we don't have to deal with the bones. The bones is never an issue. There's no plita whatsoever. Yeah, in other words, there's nothing being emitted. emission.
I think of Mavada.
Yeah.
Mavada.
Maflit is plita, toilet, right? And mavlia is bolea. So the one who basically considers just the meat says, I don't have to deal with the bones. The bones does not present a problem. There's no blia, there's no plita. It's not mavlia and it's not maflit. Okay, so far we see from this mikor that the halacha here is being formulated a little bit based on that too. In other words, the halacha that's brought in the mechaber, brought in the tour, is taken from somewhere. That's one of the mikoros. That is one of the sources. Or you can point to and say, this Gemara, look, we have a machlokes, and apparently there's some discussion about the bones. And some say it should be considered, and some say it should not be considered. But the thing is that we have another makor that says pretty much the opposite. Even though it's not exactly the same, but it's based on the Yerushalmi, in Truma, in Ora, that says that the klipos of Isur, for example, of Truma, malin esa heter, and kolshekin the klipos of heter. Klipos are the shells. The shells. In other words, imagine you have Truma, not only do you have the fruit, not only do you have the barley or the wheat, but you also have the other impurities, including the shells. What's their din? Perhaps you can claim that they may not pose a problem of Isser if one were to eat it. All right, they're not medamea, they don't cause a problem, but can I use those peels to be male? When I consider bitul, when I consider a mixture, here we have things that are not really exactly usser. They're klipos, they're shells. And the answer is yes. The same thing is with the other psolas, like subin and mursan, all the other impurities of the grains. They're mitztaref to chulin, to the permissible mixture, to be mevatel the truma. So what do we see here? That if we have other impurities, other kinds of mixtures that belong to the Isser, they do belong, nevertheless can be combined, we can use part of that Isser, to cancel the Isser out. Now this is very nice because we spend quite a bit of time talking about Isur mevatum zeh. And here, okay, if Isur can be mevatum zeh, what's the big deal about the impurities? Now impurities is obviously something a little easier to understand because they're not really usher in themselves.
Really food sometimes.
They're not really foods. Yeah, exactly. And that's a little bit easier to understand. And I think the Rash brings down, even though he discusses this, as we will see, Rabbeinu Shimshon, he says that it's not a good comparison to say that the Mekor, the source from this Yerushalmi, from Truma, because here we're talking about bones, here we're talking about klipos, and they're not exactly a very good comparison. If anything, I think Rabbeinu Shimshon says, if you want to take something, if you want to take another source somewhere, take Gida Noshe itself. Take the sciatic nerve. That's a nerve. That's something hard. And we pass in en begidin benoisen tam. Gidin, these sinews, I guess you would call in English, they don't give off tam anyway. Even though it's us, so if you see it, you have to remove it. Right? But it wouldn't cause a problem if you were to be mixed as far as emitting a flavor. That, if anything, it resembles, Rabbeinu Shimshon says it resembles that more than anything. And there you have it. Just like over there, it's not a problem. Here, it shouldn't be a problem, supposedly, if there's no tam. So we have to learn a little bit of chemistry here. We have to go a little bit deeper into this bones to see the various shitas that we will be discussing about what their svara is. And you will understand that their svara has to do with the chemical makeup of bones. It has a little bit to do with the chemical makeup of bones. Other than that, we do have sources. But sources, it's not so clear who we should paskin like. Because in the sugya of Zroa B'Sheila, which everybody agrees is one very important mekor, you have one mandoma like this and one mandoma like that, whether you consider the bones or not. But once you introduce, of course, the Yerushalmi of klipos and all that, there appears to be at least another venue, another source, which may give us some heter to be mitzaref, other things to be mevatel the Israel. So, what do we do at least with the difference between the Gemara of Chulin and the Yerushalmi? So we find various shitas who try to reconcile the two. The Rash and the Rosh, and I think the Rashba also brings it down like that, hold that all the Gemara is an asmachta. You don't learn halachas from that particular Gemara. No, the Gemara in Chulin, it's only an asmachta. You don't learn the din, you don't learn the halacha legabe atzamas from that Gemara. It's an asmachta of shiurim. You want to know where I learned shiur, sishim, or 100, according to that Madama? From Zroa B'Sheila. But to learn from that a halacha legabe atzamas, we don't. It's not clear that that's their halacha. It's not even talking about that. It's inferred. So therefore they say, these are all Rishonim, that we don't learn a halacha from that Gemara legabe atzamas. And therefore, we consider, of course, other sources, Yerushalmi, for example. And even though not everybody wants to claim that the halacha is like the Yerushalmi, I think the Ramban doesn't like that either, to say that the halacha is like that one. But anyway, that's what their shita is, that atzamos are mitztarfos. And that Gemara, don't worry about that Gemara, that's only an asmachta. You don't learn to mevata the Isser. Yeah. So these Rishonim, you have the biggest Rishonim here. They basically say, and that's what the Mechaber is going to hold, that Gemara, even though you can infer that there's a machloikas at least, you don't learn the halacha of atzamas from there. You have the Yerushalmi, and you have perhaps, according to Rabbeinu Shimshon, you also have Gid HaNoshe as sources, as rayas, that atzamas do not pose a problem like the meat itself. The Ra'o in the Ran holds that if it's atzamas that are soft, then it's a problem. And it could be that that's what the Gemara is talking about over there, that it's a soft atzamas. Soft atzamas would present a problem. They would have some lachluchis, that would be a problem, some moisture. And therefore, over there, it could be a problem. And over there, it's talking about those kind of bones. Therefore, what do I learn from that? That were that we to have atzamas yeveshas, completely dry bones without any lachluchis, it should be the halacha that they are mitztaref. The bone will not have the same din as the meat. It's a bone. Unless it's atzamas rakois. Unless they're soft atzamas.
And if they're soft, are mitzdaref to the Isser, or they're really not mitzdaref?
Yeah, they're part of the Isser.
So atzamas can either be part of the heter if they're part of the Isser if they're moist.
But there's an in-between shita. There's also another shita.
Okay. So
we're going to learn that. Yeah. So far we know that there's a machlokes. I mean, between the Rishonim, and you can have either the... So far, we'll see more. That atzamas either are mitzdaref to mivatel the Isser, that atzamas of the Isser, kol shekain that atzamas of the heter, right? And you have the other shita that says, no, if they're soft, they're a problem. If they're dry, then it's okay. We have not yet seen the poskim who hold across the board atzamas of Isser are always mitzdaref. We've seen so far, from what I've said, is that the Ran, and I think they're all, hold something in between. In other words, it depends on the type of the bone. In other words,
so again, there are those who say the bones, Isser, are always heter to be mivatel the Isser.
Yes,
that's one opinion.
That's one opinion.
And the other opinion says some bones are, namely they're dry, and bones that are soft, since they have a moisture, would be mitzdaref with the Isser and not with
right.
the heter.
And that Gemara could be talking about, according to that man de Omar, that says it's a problem with softer bones.
Right.
That is why it's a problem. So that's the Ran. The Tur brings down these two deahs. He brings down the deahs, the opposing deahs, that is, that the atzamas are either mitzdaref levatel or not, and he concludes that Rabbeinu Shimshon and his father, the Rosh, are of the opinion that atzamas mitzdaref from the heter completely levatel the Isser. And that's how the Mechaber brings down the halacha. So even though the Mechaber doesn't bring down, like sometimes he does, yesh veyesh, this the Tur does. The Tur actually brings down both, if you want to see it. And then he says that this is the way my father held, like Rabbeinu Shimshon, that in the end we have no problem with atzamas, does not distinguish between soft and dry. And the Mechaber, lehalacha lemaiser, says that too. Chatichas nevela sheyesh bo basar ve'atzamas, right? A piece of meat that is a nevela, it's aser, that has both meat and bone, shenafla legderas heter, that fell into a pot of heter food. Atzamas ha'isur mitzdarfim im ha'heter levatel ha'isur. So that atzamas of that forbidden isur, a forbidden meat, would be mitzdarf with the heter to mevatel the isur. Ve'en tzarich loymar she'atzamas ha'heter mitzdarfim. I don't even have to say, it's understood that the atzomas of the heter would also be included to be mevatel. Let's perhaps just finish the seif. Aval hamoach shebatzoma is isur mitztaref im ha'isur. The moach, if there is marrow, thank you, marrow in the atzomos, this marrow of the isur is mitzaref with isur. The gufak dero, and the actual pot itself, and here it's understood the pashut pshat, the simple meaning is that the pot, the walls of the pot cannot be included in the calculation of the bittul of the isur. Okay. So, yeah.
So the basic shot of it is that nevela with bones of bones in the nevela can be started with head.
Right.
Isur bone, that's what the mevatel the isur.
Right.
And there's Rabbeinu Shimshon.
Right.
Rabbeinu
And the
Shimshon-
Rosh too.
Right. Doesn't Rabbeinu Shimshon not distinguish Rabbeinu Shimshon? No?
Rabbeinu Shimshon, if he distinguishes between the soft ones, possibly, I don't recall right now. Why did
The
you?
Rambam, so far, the Rambam
Yeah.
is not distinguishing between soft and the actual sip, right?
Right.
He's saying it doesn't matter whether it's dry or soft.
Yeah. I don't see Rabbeinu Shimshon, I don't recall Rabbeinu Shimshon making that distinction. The Ran makes that distinction.
That's right. The Rabbeinu Shimshon is dealing with the, yeah. Yeah,
All right?
okay, thank you.
Sure. Anyway, there is the other shittas, of course, that hold that everything is asr, the bones are asr, they're not mitzaref with the heter, and the two brings down both. But he holds, and the Mechaber holds, that we follow the other shita, that the bones in themselves, even though they come from isr, don't pose a problem, and are mitzaref with the heter to be mevatel the isr. The Ramah says, "V'yesh machmirim shelo letzaref atzamot ha'isur im ha'heter levatel." In other words, even yesh machmirim means that the halacha is. That's how the poskim explain the Ramah. The halacha is that we do paskin like the Mechaber, that atzomas do not present a problem, but we're machmir. We're machmir. That's what behefsed meruba you will see that he's mekel. So we're machmir not to be mitzarv that atzomas of the isur together with the heter to be mevatel. Behefsed, mokom behefsed yeshlis mocha mekilu matirin. But kain ikar, he says, because that's the ikar hadin. The ikar hadin is that atzomas are not a problem. But we're machmir not to use them to be metzarv to be mevatel the isur.
Would you like to ask questions?
Yeah, sure.
When he says this, yeah.
Right.
You're saying Mechaber there? Not
Right, Mechaber's din, Mechaber's shita, and
That's the Mechaber's din?
the Rosh, and yes.
So he's learned, I learned anyway, in Basar,
Yes.
it says, when the Rambam says V'yesh Omri, not V'yesh Omri, that would have been a different opinion than the Mechaber when he says that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Right now, from this, yeah, I see what you're saying, but from this, the Yesh Omer, Yesh Machamina, we don't really know if what the Ramah is really talking about. We would think that he's talking about the shita that holds that is completely usher, right? That's what you would think.
Right.
That the Ramah is going back to the Yesh Machmirim here.
Right.
But you will see in the Shach that that's not exactly so.
So what does this mean, do you think?
So look, if you learn the Shach is very interesting. On the spot, the Shach says, don't mistake this to mean that Ramah is really introducing here the other shita, the opposing shita. The Ramah is really saying that we should not be mitzaref that somas isur to heter, but you are soymech on that somas heter. Let's start 1 second. Let me see it inside. יש מחרימים שלא לצרף עד סומס האיסור עם ההתר לבטל וגם לא לאיסור. Okay? So he says we don't include the bones of the isur neither to be mevatel, to combine with the heter to be mevatel the isur, neither or to be included with the basar itself.
With the isur.
Or the isur itself. אבל הצומס ההתר מצטרף from the heter. In other words, we do consider in the calculation of bitul that tzomos of heter, but when it comes to the bitul of the isur, we're not going to depend or rely on the tzomos of the isur, neither or will we calculate against it. We will only calculate against the isur.
So we treat the tzomos of the isur
neutral.
as if it didn't exist.
Exactly, neutral. So this is a third shita.
Is the Shach?
This is actually the fourth shita. I'm going to go through all four again in a minute.
So the Ramah itself. The Ramah we don't know.
What is that?
Where the Ramah is holding. We have this.
No. From the Ramah, it's not clear what he's talking about.
So the Shach is holding by control. Doesn't do
Well,
anything.
what the sheets here tell us, when the sheet says 39, the Rama holds like the third opinion. The Chavasas explains that header bones are mitzaref to header because they are lechuchis, but isser bones, the lechuchis that's asher will not asher anything because they only have a weak taste. So that's a Chavasas explanation of the Rama.
Yeah, but the Shach seems to be explaining it very well too. He seems to be saying that that's shot in the Ramah. It's not just his own shot.
You're not telling us what the Rama is saying. The Chavasas explanation.
Right. But that seems to be the explanation of the Ramah, according to the Shach too, very clearly. Yeah. Yeah. The atzomas of the Isur are neutral. Now in the Darchei Moshe, he brings down in the name of Agos Shara Dura, and who brings the Orzarua, that what the idea behind this chumrah of atzoma is not to be metzarefet, not to Isur, not to heter, is based on what? You know, he just says that this idea, this halacha of not being metzaref, the atzoma goes both ways. It's not, in other words, like we said before with the shach, not to be metzarefet, not to Isur, not to heter. But in other words, he doesn't explain what the svara is. All he says that this is what's brought down, very similar to the shach, that what we're machmir in the atzomos is not to use them at all. And what's interesting about this, what I find interesting about this, is that this is similar to a Rosh. I saw the Rosh brings down in that Yerushalmi of Truma that I'm almost sure he's the only one that says that when it comes to Tenoifes of Truma, it would also be neutral. We would not be able to use it either way. Only with klipos. He makes that distinction there. So I thought it was very interesting that here, the Darchei Moshe bringing down the name of the Orzarua, which is really what the Shach is saying in the Ramah too, that the Chumrah here is just not to include it, not to use it as a shear of Beitul, but we do not consider that as part of the Isra either. Alright, but still, even though they're saying the same thing as the Shach, they don't tell us what the reason for that Chumrah is. Anyone want to guess what's this Chumrah all about? Why should we be Machmir then?
Why what?
You know, to make it neutral, it's really ending up being a fourth shita here, in a sense. What's the source of this one? Why not? I mean, either this or that. Either you hold like this or you hold like that.
So I just quote us.
The what?
Just one possibility. The taste of the bones is too weak to amplify.
Yeah, but there's a problem here, as we will soon see, that there's a memonev shach. I think the Rabbinical brings down this memonev shach. Several, maybe the Aruch HaShulchan too, I think. What's the memonev shach? I mean, if it's not a problem, if the tzomas are not a problem, I mean, we're not going to be meshar against them, then why can't they be used to be mevato? If they are a problem, then include them too. And they, of course, they're not mitzdaref. But I mean, it's a memonev shach. And why just be machmir neutral? Where does that come from?
I don't get it.
It's a memonev shach. If atzomas are not a problem, then why can't I use it to be mevato? If it is a problem,
That's a good question.
yeah. If it is a problem, then I understand. I can't include it.
Right.
It's not exactly like Isurim mevatel zeh. Where it can work both ways because they cancel each other's time.
So by the Chavastas, he says on the one hand that it is being emitted,
Right.
it's not going to weaken
Yeah,
it.
that's
It's
what
going to amplify it.
Right.
However, the amplification is so minimal that we don't need to take that into account in order to be mevatel it.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, the fact that it is amplifying the taste prevents us from including to be mevatel the taste, because it's not reducing the taste, it's amplifying it. It's not weakening the taste of it, so it's amplifying it.
Right.
However, the amplification being so small, we don't need to factor it in as something that needs to be mevatel in addition to the...
Yes,
to the
we will
tasting
see
of
that
it.
svara too. When I talk a little bit about the svaras, when we speak about the svaras of the shitas, we'll talk about that.
But I'm just saying, that's one
Right.
possibility to explain,
Yeah.
because you were asking.
Right now, I didn't get into that, but I will tell you what the Crazy Flacy says and what the Taz says
Okay.
about svara, of what the shitas hold. It's not just a makor, there's a svara behind everything.
You mean a swore? You mean something like that?
No, because it's not clear from the Gemara. I mean, the Gemara, unless you learn like the Gemara in Chulul, like the Mandalama says, it's also, but we still don't know what the svara is. The svara means, why should somebody say it is a problem and one is not?
His problem is vocabulary.
Chemistry,
Svara.
svara.
The word svara means that's problem.
No, Makor is the source. Where do we learn it from? The source is the Gemara, the source is the Yerushalmi.
But he doesn't know what Svara is.
Yeah.
He thinks
All right.
Svara is also Makor.
No. No. Svara is, what's his reasoning? That's the word. Svara means reasoning. What's the reasoning behind those who say atzamas are a problem and those who say it's not? Without any Makor. And if you had a clear Makor, well, I learned it from here. I don't know what the Svara is because it doesn't say. It doesn't. The Torah doesn't always give us an explanation or a Svara of why something is forbidden, right? Kachal. Kachal is very interesting, right? So we discussed a little bit what's interesting about Kachal. It's how it's all midrabanan anyway. Right. That's what the shear of Kachal is different. It's unique. So we'll get to what the Svaras are here between the various shitas. But before we go to the Svaras, what's this Chumrah here?
What's the Chumrah? Are you looking for a Makor or are you looking for...
I mean, why should we be machmir? This is really a fourth shita. Perhaps we should go through all the shita now. We have the shita that holds that atzamas are mitztaref to be mevatel the iser, machaber, the various rishonim. We have the other shita who hold that atzamas are aser, just like the Basar itself. That's the second shita. Okay. The third shita is the Ran. We make a distinction between depending on the type of bones, if the bones are soft or not. In other words, the Mai said, you're right. If it's the dry bones, they would cancel out the Isser. But if they're soft bones, like perhaps the Gemara is talking about, then they would not. And all of a sudden here we see a fourth shita. Basically, that's what the Ramah, based on what the Shach explained, that you say the Chavas Das also. And that's how he brings it in the Darche Moshe, that we're machmir, that the bones of the Isser are neutral. Neither do we calculate against it, but we can't use them as well to be mitzdaref with the heter to mivatel the Isser. So this is the fourth sheet.
But since it's a Humrah, it sounds like actually we could mitzdaref and be mivatel the Isser, but out of a stringy, we're not going to do that. Which already discourages any thought that could be mitzdaref to the Isser.
The what?
If we're not being mitzdaref them to the heter
right.
out of a humrah, so that argument discourages any thought that could be mitzdaref to the Isser. Apparently,
it depends how you start.
Well,
but if
it's a humrah.
Right.
I mean, if there's a possibility of mitzdaref to the Isser, then not being mitzdaref to the heter would not be a humrah. Then obviously,
it's going to be why we believe that point if the bones are neutral.
No. When the Ramah formulates, we're not being mitzdaref to the heter, the humrah. What prevents me from including these bones in being mevatel the Isser? What prevents me? Says the Ramah, it's a chumrah. We're being strict here. So if my not being mitzdarefet to the heter is a stringency, yes, because I'm being strict, all I'm saying is that discourages any thought that these same bones could mitzdaref to the Isser.
Okay, anyway, we're going to see. When we talk about the Svaras, we will understand a little bit what the possible explanation for this chumrah is. So let's begin with the Svaras of the Machlekes of the Rishonim. Those who are machmir, very simply, hold that there's enough lachluchis, there's actually enough lachluchis, enough moisture in the bones, and tam, for the atzamas to contribute to the Isser. Very simple. There's enough lachluchis. There is, whatever. I mean, there's enough lachluchis, and they don't distinguish between the bones. That's what they would hold. On the other hand, even though they hold that the bones do have lachluchis, the nature of the bones is that they are capable of absorbing too. Even though on the one hand we're saying contribute to the Isser, they also, the heter ones, have the ability to absorb. So we can use at least the bones of the heter. Right? In other words, what are we saying? That there's enough lachluchis to make it aser. But bones also have the ability to absorb. So at least the bones of the heter will help us in the bittul process.
Basically, the bones don't have a special bit. Bones of Isser will aser, and bones of heter will...
Exactly. Very good. Very good. Yeah.
The luchos goes both ways. That So somehow the wetness of the bones.
The moisture of the bones and the tam is there sufficient to be. I need to reckon with it. Yeah, when I'm Meshire, when I calculate, I need to calculate against the bones too, because there's some Isser there too.
From this which has
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But on the other bones, there's lachluchus that's.
No, they didn't really say lachluchis. We'll see the Taz. The Taz mentions interesting idea of lachluchis. No, I said in the Isser bones. I said that the heter bones have the ability to absorb. The Taz adds a little detail here, since I already mentioned that it's not just the bones of the heter, it's the lachluchis of the heter bones that are mevalbel the tam. Mebalbel, confuses, cancels, neutralizes. Like you said, they have tam, they have lachluchis too. And the lachluchis of the heter also does something to the other tam. So it's both. You're right. It's a good point. I'm not only using the bones because they are bones and they absorb. I'm using the lachluchis in the heter bones to neutralize the lachluchis of the isur. In other words, I'm considering everything. The whole bone works. Everything works together. The lachluchis, the bone, the structure of the bone to cancel out any tam coming from the isur.
So that's being to the heter.
But yeah, yes.
So according to the Taz, it's the lachluchas in addition to this, or is it the lachluchas of the head?
No, it's both.
Both.
Both. It's
and
always
according
both.
to the other opinion, won't mention lachluchas.
They just mention
with the Taz.
Yeah. In other words, it's just they're just not mentioning. They're just not mentioning it. They're just saying it's the nature of the bones to absorb. But it would be interesting. I mean, does it really make a difference or not?
But ultimately, you're going to count the bones.
Right. Exactly.
Bones
Yeah.
plus.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's the svara according to the ones who are machmir, that there's lachluchis. On the other hand, they agree that at Somas, at least at the heter, have the ability to absorb.
Here's an uninteresting point to what you said.
Yeah.
Apparently the Mitzvah Sahaf is not so happy with the Taz. He says eggshells are also mistarif, whereas eggshells do not have vichlut. From this he wants to conclude that the Taz is the inclusion of ones that make the heter, that the lichud point.
Is not the point. Yeah, possibly. I wouldn't understand what the comparison is with
use it as a
eggshells.
question.
Yeah. I don't understand what the comparison with eggshells, because we did learn by eggs that there may not be a plita, but they are bolea. So I'm not sure really what the difference would be.
Oh, that's what he's saying. The eggshells are bolea. Lucas, they're dry.
Yeah,
That's
okay,
the Mitzvah
but,
Sahaf
yeah, all right.
exact,
But
point.
maybe that's eggs, shells, and this is bones. All right. Anyway, the matirim, the ones who are matir the bones, we can go ahead and use the bones. They hold that, you know what? Atzamas don't really have a real lachluchis or a mamish iser. They do have the ability to absorb, but they don't have a real lachluchis that I really have to reckon with. That's the basic difference between the two. We're going to see something else in a moment. Yeah, the ones who are matir. Now, how about the ones who hold, okay, if that's the case, the lachluchis is not a problem, but we're still going to be machmer. Remember, we just asked, what's their svara? So I saw brought down that it's not correct. That's what I saw. I don't know who says it. The svara is it's not correct to use an isser in itself, the hefts of the isser, to do mevatel itself. Itself.
Another isser, okay, but not itself.
Exactly. The hefts of the isser that you're using now, this thing is isser. It's meat. And part of it is a bone. It doesn't make sense. It's a chumrah. Remember, it's a chumrah. It doesn't make sense to use the hefts of the isser itself to be mevatel itself.
Counterintuitive.
Yeah.
You don't make the bank robber.
Yeah. But I like the crazy inflacy. Crazy inflacy just brings down that the plita, whatever plita may be in that somos, is a tam kolush. Remember, we spoke several times about this tam kolush thing. Even though atzamas do have a little bit of a flavor in them, you may claim, it's so small that it doesn't pose a problem of tam ki'ikr, of isser, and therefore that's the reason that svar, at least, for those who are matir it. Yeah.
So that would be reason not to starve it to the isser.
When you say
Crazy Flacy explains that the real reason why those who are matir, that it's permissible to use the bones of the isser to cancel out the isser. How could you do that? There's lachluchis. So we said before, there's no lachluchis. He said, no, there is a little bit, but it's so kolush, it's so little that it's not significant. It's not a significant tam, it's not a significant lachluchis to pose a problem.
But the same place he says, and therefore, though there is a little thing, can be mitzaref the bone.
Yes. Even though there's just a little bit, it's tam kolush, it's not a problem. And I thought, basically,
Can be mitzaref to the header.
to the heter, and I thought perhaps maybe that made more sense based on the crazy flacy. There's an agreement that there is some flavor, and that's why we're machmer. With Hefts of Israel, I wasn't sure about, so I thought maybe that, based on this, everybody's in agreement that there may be a little bit of flavoring after all. So that's what, because we have to be machmer. But we'll see. There may
But
be.
the crazy place is not.
No, he's not. He's just explaining the ones who are matir. But there's another interesting Taz. I like this Taz for another reason. I'm going to give you a surprise later on, based on what the Taz says. The Taz says, in explaining the Mechaber, why Atzomos Isra are mitztaref, and we said the svara, the basic svara was that that there's no lachluchis. That was the basic svara. The Taz says it has nothing to do with lachluch really. That the issue is not lachluchis, even though he does use lachluchis in some ways to mevatel too. He says the main criteria, and he's right. I'll show you. I'll prove it to you from a Rambam. The main criteria here on why the Mechaber paskins like that somos of Isser can actually be mevatel the Isser, which I would think is a chiddush. You'll see why it's a chiddush soon. We're going to have a big question under Ramah about Isser Davuk soon. But before we get to that, the Taz says something very nice. Lefi she'einam bnei achila. You know why atzomos are okay? You know why it's not a problem? You have here meat that is nevela, and you have atzomos. It says atzomos bones are not edible. Well, I shouldn't say the word edible. I'm sorry. The bones of the animal are not really food. They're not for consumption. They're not really aser. And therefore, einam bichlal ha'isr. They still have the ability to absorb, but as far as isr, they're not aser. And let me quote to you the Rambam. The Rambam brings down in Macholas Asuras that bones, hide, the skin, horns of a nevela, amongst other things, or a treifa, it's usher to eat it, but you don't get malchus for it, because that's not the real isser. So why is it usher? So some say it's an isser midirabanan. I think the Bach says it's an isser midirabanan. So the Taz is going one step further. He's saying that the criteria here, in other words, what's really the real source of heter here, of why we paskin like that, and we hold by this shita, is forget about lachluchis in the bones not being enough. The Taz really focuses on something completely different. He says, yes, it may be true that there's not enough lachluchis, or like the crucifixes, it's kolush. He says, but bones are not bnei achila. They're not aser.
They're not food.
They're not food. And the Rambam brings it down, halacha l'maaseh, bones are not food. If you were to eat a bone, the shank bone, you were to eat the bone of a pig,
Without the marrow.
as opposed to the skin, which the Rambam says that it's not so special because it's almost like the meat. It would not be an Isser Torah, or if it is, you wouldn't get malchus at least on it. The Bach says, a lot of I think boys can hold that it's a derabanan. It's an Isser derabanan to eat it. So you understand? So the Taz is saying, forget everything else. You don't have to bring sevoras. It's a partial to think. Bones are simply not aser in the Torah, and they can be, and they are absorbent too. So you can use it to be matzaref to mevatel the iser. That's all. You can't eat the bones, whether it's a rice or the rabbanon. You wouldn't get malchus. You can't eat them. But here it fell in. It works. It helps to be mevatel the iser. The first one. And I think this is a very important Taz. I think it's a very important Taz because it will help us understand something else soon. Then he does add in this same Taz, the flavor travels everywhere into the bones too. And they also have lachluchis. So he does say this lachluchis thing, that there is a lachluchis in them. So even though he doesn't say which, all the bones have lachluchis, either way. The lachluchis is a factor too, but he doesn't seem to be saying that that's the most important thing. He just says that the bones are absorbent, plus bones are not food. And as we saw from the Rambam, they're not really aser. Now, the Achiezer Keep in mind, we're going to mention him soon again. The Achiezer, you know who's the Achiezer here? Rav Chaim Oizer Grudensky. Very beautiful sefer. And the Chazon Ish, they say something very interesting. And we need to know that because it's Nogea Halacha L'Maaseh. That what the Rambam says, that it's also to eat the bones, it's only soft bones. What the Rambam said in his Halacha about the Isser, at least with the Rabbana, whatever, that there's an Isser of sorts to eat the bones, it's only soft bones. That the Rambam would agree if the bones are completely dry, the Isser wouldn't apply. Now, do you remember from Basar B'chalav in the very, very beginning, Pei Zayin, the Mechaber brings down that if you cook bones with milk, it's butter?
It came later.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
The very, very beginning, about the Isser of cooking Basar B'chalav says, but if you cook the bones with the chalav, you're butter. Mechaber, Pei Zayin, Halacha Zayin. Yeah, I can read it to you. Well, no, real quickly. Yeah. Just keep this in mind as we're going through, because you're going to see how this will help us understand an interesting halacha. Mevashel shlil b'cholav hayav. What's the shlil? The fetus. Okay. V'chen achro, if you eat it, aval mevashel shilyo. What's the shilyo? Shilyo is not the meat itself; it's just the bag, the placenta, the sac, or the hide, the gidim, the sinews, the atzomos, the bones, the korek, the bone, the horns, utlofaim, and the hoofs, harakim, the soft potter, potter. Even if you, so all these things, if you were to cook them with milk, it's not basar b'chalav. It's potter. You're not allowed to, but it's potter.
Right.
Yeah. It's potter. It's potter. Yeah, you're not allowed to do it, but it's potter. Right. No. Yeah. Okay. So what do we see so far? That there's an interesting distinction, especially based on the Achiezer and Chazon Ish, that if we're talking about Tatzomos Rakos, that if something is completely dry, it may have some advantages. Okay, just keep that in mind. So we remember the 4 shitas, right? Those who are matir, those who are aser, to be mitzarv the bones, those who are in between, like the Ran that says
Depends on the type of bone.
it depends on the type of bone, and those who are just machmir and make the bones of the Isra neutral. Okay, the Mechaber goes on that even though I was matir the bones of mitzarv, not the moach is not mitzarv, the marrow is not mitzarv to the Isra. So the Pri Megadim brings down as far as the marrow is concerned. This is also true even if the bone is completely sealed, closed on all sides.
Wait a second. You just says the marrow is mitzvah.
Okay, I may have said it wrong. Right.
Yeah.
The moach, even though we say that the bones are mistarif to cancel the Isser, the moach it's not mistarif to cancel the Isser. The moach is mistarif, if anything, to the Isser itself. Moshe Batzomas Isser mistarif in my Isser. So the moach in that somas of the Isser are mistarif. So the Pri Megadim brings down, he adds, that this is also true even if the bones are completely closed. You still have to calculate against the moyach. All right. What is that?
Rashba. We have it.
The Rashba holds that? Yeah. About bones being completely sealed?
No. About the marrow.
About the marrow and the bones. Yeah.
That what?
The Rashba holds like the Mechaber is saying here. That the bones are mitzvah with the
yes,
but the marrow is mitzvah with the Yisr.
Right, but the Pri Megadim adds that even if the bone is completely sealed, makes no difference. You still have to calculate against it. Yeah. As far as the moyach is concerned, yes.
No, you said the Rashba holds by Rabbeinu Shimshon. That's the Mechaber then.
Yeah, when the Chaber brings down the Tur, the Rosh, the Maskana, it happens to be that the Rashba also holds like that in the Torah Sabayis.
How do you know the Beis Yosef or something?
Yeah, if you learn the Tur Beis Yosef, you see that he basically goes like the Maskana, like the father of the Tur, the Rosh, and Rabbeinu Shimshon, right? And that's how he brings down the halacha. He doesn't mention the Rashba necessarily here. The Rashba is brought down. I mean, the Rashba is also big Rishon in the Poisek, but that's not. He may have looked at the Rashba. He may have looked at other Poisek who say, "Oh, they all say this." But the main guiding halacha here is the Tur, who brings down the Rosh, and he basically says that's the consensus of the Rishonim is like Rabbeinu Shimshon and the Rosh. It happens to be that the Rashba also says that. Yes. All right, let's just go on.
The Rashba was a lot older. Was before all these people, right?
Not if around. I mean, he's
Not
more.
the Rambam, but he was
He's more like in the time. No, around that time. A little bit, maybe a little bit older.
Same time?
Yeah, a little bit maybe older. Yeah. That's the time period, more or less, give or take. Maybe, I don't recall. Rosh was first in Germany, but then in Spain. He's the first Ashkenazi to become a Sephardic rabbi. But anyway, that's the period of
So
time.
when we quoted the Rosh,
Yeah.
then we find him being quoted from either of the two periods, being quoted
What do
as
you mean by periods?
Ashkenazi or as Sephardic. Because I once heard that when he became a Sephardic rabbi, he actually to
Right.
Paskin,
Right.
then he started Paskining Sephardic halacha, and not Ashkenazi.
Well, he had to consider, there have been Hagim too. He had to consider
Right.
various
So
others.
that's why I'm wondering when we
But he had, remember, he's a Rishon, so he had Basar. He had to go according to his. He's the Poiskim. Yeah, he was Ashkenaz.
He didn't go because of Spain.
Exactly. Yes, because of situations. Yeah. So anyway,
So we're Paskining from either of the two periods.
either of the two periods. Yeah. The Rashba may have been maybe a little bit before. I don't recall exactly who was first, but they're around the same time. Okay, so far we've seen the sources being the Gemara al Chulin, the Yerushalmi, and also what the Rash said about Gid HaNoshe. Gid HaNoshe is still also I guess, I don't know if we can call it a source, but it does present us with some explanation as why Atzamas are not really a problem, like the Taz says, and not Bnei Achila. Gid HaNoshe, there's no Tam, so it doesn't present itself a problem. In other words, if you're concerned about Tam, there's no problem with Tam. But the Taz basically brings it very clearly and says that the main idea behind it is not necessarily lachluchis or anything like that. It's just that bones have never been a problem. All right. Let's go first quickly to Sif Beis. Babet Vor Mamurim, all that we've said till now is in what scenario? Shatzomas ha'isu mitztarfim hahetek shenoflo chaticha navela likdeiros hahetek shoyo chayo. That's all that we've just said is a scenario of where a piece of the nevela fell into a pot of heter when it was raw meat. The Isser was raw. But if it was first cooked somewhere, and then it fell into Kderes heter at Tzamos, Shebo mitztarf ma Isser. Then that Tzamos of the Isser we will mitztarf with the Isser. Why? Because if it was already cooked, once the nevela has been cooked by itself, then its own bones have absorbed, they're absorbable, remember? They have absorbed from the Isser. So since they have absorbed from the Isser, once they fall in as a cooked piece of nevela, then you have to figure against the whole thing, not just the meat, but the tzomos too. What? Yeah, that's a very simple halacha. Yeah, the whole thing is like a shtickle nevela, like we say in Yiddish. The whole thing is one big nevela, the bones and everything. Now, the Pri Megadim, once you learn Seif Beis, you find a Pri Megadim that says that will explain to you also the Ramah. Remember we talked about what's this Chumrah all about? Remember that? What's this Chumrah and the Ramah all about? Yeah. So once you learn Seif Beis, and you look at the Pri Megadim and Seif Beis, he says, Seif Beis says that basically once it has been cooked, you have to figure against the whole thing. So the Pri Megadim brings down, you know why? Now you understand why we're Machmir before in Seif Aleph, not to be Mitzaref, that Tzomos HaIsur, because you may come to make a mistake in the event it was cooked, this nevela, before. Because if the nevela was cooked, we don't calculate, we don't use that Tzomos of the nevela to cancel out the nevela, right? Once Seif Beis says that if it was cooked, the whole thing is Asr. So the Pri Megadim says that's the reason, that's the way he explains the Chumrah. Why are we Machmir in Seif Aleph like the Ramah? That we don't use that Tzomos of the Isser in the bittul process, because you may come to make a mistake. Oh, it's okay. But maybe this time it was cooked, and it's not okay, because everybody agrees if it's cooked, it's not okay. So because you may come to make a mistake, you don't use atzamos, even if they're not cooked.
No.
Nice? We got them. Yeah.
By the way, the Rosh was almost identical.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Rosh was
That's a quick search.
12:35 till 10:10,
Quick search.
and the Rosh 12:50 to 30. So the Rosh was 10 years young.
Right. That's what I recall. Yeah.
Vayesh Marim and the Hefsed Meruba. You're saying that's not what, that essential din is not said Meruba, or Hefsed.
No, we can still be makel in the Hefsed Meruba.
Yeah,
That's for
but
sure.
He says this is the essential din. At the end of the Ramah says
This is the essential din, meaning that because the Mechaber is right, we paskin like the Shita, the holes that Atzomas, like the Taz says, are not bnei achila, we can count them or use them to calculate against the Isser.
So when he essential din, the Ramah.
Like the Mechaber.
I think in Maruba we go like the Mechaber.
Yes.
The essential din.
Why?
He's saying,
Why do we go like the Mechaber?
But
Yeah.
in Hefsed you like the Mechaber.
Yes.
And you say essential din.
Because this is essential din is like the Mechaber.
Because what the Mechaber says, it's all the time. The Ramah says it's in a Hefsed.
Right.
The Mechaber doesn't say in a Hefsed.
No. So
That's
the Ramah says we are machmer to make the bones neutral, like the Shach explained. But in a Hefsed Meruba, you can be soymech on who? On the Mekilin. And those who are lenient in this halacha. Why? Why can you be soymech?
Well, if it's an outright isser,
Right.
then even if Chefzet Meruba, you can't start eating pork just because it's.
We have two shitas. And why should we be makel in a Hefsed Meruba? It's because קיהן ikar. That's really the halacha. The halacha is, so why you be machmir? Well, we have the Pri Megadim now. We have this very svars of why he's being machmir. We have to understand why he's machmir. He didn't explain himself. So we had a Pri Megadim now that does a nice job in explaining that people might come to make a mistake.
I'm sorry to keep.
Sure.
It's really a key thing when he says this is the essential din.
This,
So he's saying this is basic law here. This is
the mechaber's halacha, yeah.
Yeah. So, but he said Hefsed didn't mean to go that way.
Right.
So it indicates the essential law. You know what I mean?
No, because he's machmir. He's machmir.
So Machmir doesn't mean Machmir is not saying.
I disagree with the mechaber. I have another tradition. He's not saying that.
He's not saying
Yeah, right, it could be. But here,
he's
right,
not saying I have something to the Mechaber. He's saying, but we'll be Machmir.
we'll be machmir here. We have reasons to be
But the
machmir.
essential is that
It's like the mechaber, right?
that's why in Hefsed. No, I never really know.
A tremendous loss.
No.
Depends
What
on the
does
income
Hefsed- What
situation.
does
Also,
the Hefsed
yeah.
mean?
Eventually, I think we'll be getting into it a lot in Taaruvot. What is a hefsed? How much is a hefsed? Is it one chicken? Is a big hefsed for some people. For a caterer, it may not be.
For a caterer of 500 chicken dinners.
Right. So eventually, we'll talk. I think we'll have time to cover that too.
So if I understand correctly from what the David said, so basically this really in and of itself there is no. But there is another consideration that prompts us to be mahmir, not to factor it in. So therefore, when it comes to a special condition called chesed meruba, we
Yes.
can rely on the fact that essentially there is no real issa here
Right.
and
Yes.
permitted.
Yeah, it would be a problem.
We can set aside our additional considerations in such a case.
This situation, you should know, is
Let me say that
yeah.
the hefset meruba outweighs the additional considerations that make us machmir.
Right. Yes, very true. Because there are other situations where the Ramah talks about hefsed meruba, but in those cases, he has to really be mitzaref kulas.
Right.
You know what? There is a svara like this. There is a shita like that. Here he says he adds the words which he rarely does. קיהן ikar, because it's just the chumrah, but really the halacha is like the mechaber. So which is interesting. It's not like there is really two opposing camps anymore. We sided with one camp, the camp that is mater, but we're machmer for some reason. All right. Yes, definitely. Yeah, Meikar adin. Meikar adin. Yes, sure. All right. Let's just quickly see a couple more points. The gabe, the kdera, that it's not mitzdaref. That's also a very interesting point. The kdera is not mitzdaref, right? In Sif Aleph, guf kdera eno mitzdarefes. I just skipped through it quickly, but really, the Taz goes through it and explains what the issue is. That it's not very clear in the Gemara what we're talking about. What do you mean by the kdera is not mitzdarefes? So the Prisha I saw brings down a simple explanation of why we don't use the kdera. Why can't we use a little bit of the kdera to cancel out the isser here? The kdera is a pot.
Yeah, but are we talking about the pot, or are we talking in the pot?
Oh, so that was part of the question. It's part of the puzzle. That's part of the puzzle, and I don't know how much we should get into that, because eventually, in a couple more seifim, we will see where we can rely on that.
I mean, Siman.
Yeah.
Okay.
We will soon see. So we'll leave it for there.
It's very difficult what's going on there.
Yeah. No.
It's very hard, but it's very
Yeah.
difficult to me.
Yeah. But you will see that when we come to it, that it's not very common. It's not a very common situation where you can use because in the end we're talking about blias really. the Gdera itself. But anyway, as far as this halacha is concerned here, what does the Mechaber mean by we don't use the Gdera? So I saw brought down, and the Prisha brings down, that the pot by now most likely has already absorbed a lot. So it's so full, it can't absorb anymore. And therefore, loy plug. You know what loy plug means? We don't make any distinction between a new pot versus a used pot. There's so many blias already within the walls of the Gdera that we can't really use it. We can't really depend on that. We can't figure it in considering how much bitul do we really have. So that's the Prisha. There's others that give their own explanation, but I think that's enough for this halacha. All right, now in Seif Beis, that we said that we have to be mashar against the whole thing, the bones, the meat, and everything. Why is that so? All we did was learn the halacha, that we have to be mashar against the meat and the bones. Remember, it was already cooked, but what's the reason for it? What's the reason why, once the bones were cooked, you have to be mashar against the whole thing? Because once it's cooked, the bones have absorbed iser, part of the meat. Oh, if that's the case, that the bones have absorbed part of the iser, the Pri Megadim brings down that according to the Mechaber and those who hold there's no chanan in Shar Isurim, if you happen to know the size of the meat that fell in before it was cooked, you can ignore the bones this time too. Because according to the Ramah who holds, right, chanan b'Shar Isurim, the bones are really a chanan.
Right.
So that's what's happening now. If this meat was once cooked by itself and then falls in, you really have a whole piece that is usher. The bones is usher, the meat is, of course you can't use the bones. It's all chanan. It's all usher. But based on the Mechaber's that there's no chanan b'Shar Yisurim, if you would to know what the size was before, and what are we suspecting here, or what are we afraid of? That maybe the bones absorbed a little bit? Well, if you know what the size was before, then you can ignore the bones.
Whatever the bone absorbed will now be less in.
Exactly. So this is important. I mean, if you have a lot of bones, meat, I mean, you got to calculate, depending how much the bone is too, how big the bone is. So this is a very interesting difference between the Mechaber and the Ramah, that if you were to know, you could do that.
You could even have a bone that's larger than the meat.
Yes. Pri Megadim says very nicely. I think others also bring down this distinction, this chiluk, that based on the Mechaber's shita that he would only say chanan b'Shar Yisurim, if this piece of meat was cooked, and we learned the halacha was that because it's cooked, you have to be mashar against the whole thing. If you happen to have known beforehand how big this meat was before it fell in, you can ignore the bones. Because once you know the size of the meat, you know the size of the meat. Just figure against this original size of the meat. Then you can just ignore the bones now too.
Because anything in the meat.
Yes, exactly.
That's enough.
Yeah.
How do you distinguish between and the meat? There's a question I have.
Yeah. No, go ahead. What's the question?
If you have something else,
Yes.
obviously it's coming from.
That's because we don't know how much. Yeah, but sometimes we don't know how much came out, how much was absorbed.
You know
Yeah.
how much meat, how much milk. We saw this, right? If
Sure.
you know how much milk in,
Yeah.
then you take into account the whole.
Yeah.
So you just, but oftentimes when you just milk in the pot after
Yes.
So what's the difference? So it's creating.
We sometimes don't know. That's what a suffix is all about. Yes.
It's like a big problem to me.
In Taaruvot, it's all about sfeikas. We have doubts. How much time there is, and
I'm not saying it's out. I'm saying, we say it. And also,
when you actually know.
Say there's 2 ounces of bleos in that milk spoon in a meat pot.
Right.
Say 2 ounces. There could still be ounces of milk in the milk pot. It could still.
No, you don't have more. If you know for sure. Did you learn the halacha in Basar b'Chalov?
First of all, when we're looking at the spoon that was in the meat pot, we're not looking at having absorbed milk.
Yeah, no, I
So we're not surprised that there's still milk remaining in the milk pot.
What's the difference between
hold on. I'm about to explain
Yeah.
that. Hold on a second. So we're not surprised that there's milk remaining in the milk pot. Now, so the question becomes, and how much of the taste of the milk was absorbed by the spoon? And how much was absorbed, we don't. So we have to assume the worst case scenario.
Yes.
Namely that as much milk as was there, that's the maximum of how much taste could have been given off.
Yeah. Yes.
So we don't know how much, but we just.
We assume the worst case scenario. That's how it is.
Actually
And when you know how much it is, it helps.
So you know that the 2 ounces of milk was in there, so maximum 2 ounces worth of taste is in the
Most of the
spoon
time
now.
we don't know.
And of course the 2
Right.
ounces of milk will have
Yeah.
remained in there, because we're not absorbing the milk,
But if we
but
don't
only
know how
the taste.
much was in the pot, then we spoons us.
Yes,
Sure,
exactly.
that's,
Yeah.
that's all.
Yeah. Let's see one more question here on the Ramah. Well, we had some doubts about why he's being machmer, but one more question that the Bach brings down on the Ramah. He doesn't understand. Remember Isu Davuk in Basar B'chalav? Yeah. He says, well, don't you have an Isu Davuk of sorts over here? And that should make all the bones, as it's being cooked, a chanan.
According to the Ramah.
According to the Ramah, you know, what's the question here? He says the whole thing should become asur just because of Isur Davuk. It's a kind of Isur Davuk. It's all one piece, right? And especially the Bach is picking on the Ramah here. The Bach is saying, hey, Ramah, you were concerned. Remember, we learned it before in the Halacha Taaruvot. You were concerned about Kli Cheres becoming Chanan too. The Cheres, right? The clay.
Right. because it doesn't be
Where
raw.
there's no real Isser there, right? There's no real Isser Balua, but nevertheless, there's that concern. There's that svara based on a certain sheet as maybe the whole cheres can become chanan. Says if you can say that there, what about this? So the Bach, it's an interesting question.
Good point.
Good point. I thought about that on my own too. While I was going through this. Hey, Ramah, I remember you talked about Isser Davuk. What about this? This is a real Isser Davuk. They're really together. So the Bach brings down this question, but the Shach and Taz, basically, there's a lot of poskim here that try to explain the Bach, or give an answer to the Bach's question, that why it's not a problem over here. Because by Kli Cheres, what was the issue by Kli Cheres? By Kli Cheres, the problem or the concern of the Ramah of why it remains possibly Chanan is because you cannot make Hagolah to the Cheres. Cheres cannot make Hagolah. But by Kli Etzem, anything that's made from bone, you can make Hagolah. Yes. Radan Halacha, Kli Etzem, kalim that are made from bone, you can make Hagolah too. So here there wouldn't be such a problem because the Hagolah would apply, or at least the ability to make Hagolah from the bone would apply. So it's not a real Isur Davuk.
Now, according to the Ramah, if the bone with the meat blown, then the bone would chanan.
It would be
So
chanan.
It would be a case of this. Here, the bone and the meat are being cooked.
No, but not because of Isur Davuk so much. Not so much because of the Isur Davuk.
Let me put it like
yeah.
this. The Badeh Shulchan Isur Davuk
Right.
as what is Isur Davuk? Isur Davuk is simply a which we are worried that the Isur and that which it is Davuk to
Right.
will at some point in time
Absorb
become
more.
separated
Oh, okay.
from everything else.
Right.
And the header does not have 60 times the Isur that's Davuk to it. So at that point it will become.
Okay.
And since we must be thoughtful of that,
Right.
so therefore, so that's what he says the Isur Davuk. But the Isur Davuk, according to Badeh Shulchan's explanation, is no more than the fact. Well, there are two explanations: either that it more eagerly releases
Exactly. Or
its
absorbs.
taste
Yeah.
into the head,
Right. Because
And
it's so
that-
close.
because it's so close, or because since they're Davuk together, they're likely to become separated together from the rest of the pot.
Yeah. I do remember seeing, I think it could be the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan has a whole nice of this particular seif as well. And it may be there that to say Isur Davik on the Isur, we don't say. Isur Davik is we say on the heter. That the Isur is Davik to the heter. But to say the concept of Isur Davik to the Isur itself, that we don't say. Interesting.
But if one is Davuk to the other, wouldn't the other one?
Yeah. I mean,
What's the difference? Who's
no.
Davuk?
Either way, everybody's masking if base that it becomes a form of Hanan. The whole thing becomes Asr. But,
You're right.
Right. But that's because it was already cooked by itself. But now, at the time that it's being cooked in Seif Aleph,
Right, but
for
they
the
have
Ramah,
60 again.
they remember the questions in the Ramah. What do we need? But you have to be Machmer, Isur Davuk.
But we're saying that you have 6 as the Isser.
Right.
So let's separate two ideas here.
Right.
If we have an Isser Davuk, but the piece of meat with the Chalif Davuk to it is inserted in the meat, and there is 60 in the pot, the Isser Davuk is not going to make the Techu Hanan. It's only if it's sticking out of the roitiv.
Yeah, that's the Ramah. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what we're talking about, the
Yeah,
Ramah.
yeah. If it's sticking out. Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah, it's not the Bach. Remember, the Bach is not exact. I don't know if he meant exactly the exact scenario of Isur Davik by Basar B'Chala, but he was trying to say that they're so close to each other, it should be like Isur Dabuk, Chanan. But anyway, but the answer, the way I think the Shach, the Taz, both say that it's different than Klicheres at least. The Bach was trying to say at least from Klicheres we should learn that this should be the same, but it's not the same like Klicheres. Here it's Kli Etzem. I'd like to finish with a nice little surprise. Okay, now we learned several concepts. Atzamos Yeveshas, dry bones, right? They're not bnei achila, as the Taz says, atzamos bichlal, don't constitute food. And you could be mitzvah of them sometimes to cancel out Isser, right? And if anything, a problem would be with soft bones because of tam, lachluchas, and so forth. Well, you know what this whole sugya helps us? It helps us understand the problems with gelatin.
Yeah, sure.
Gelatin! Wouldn't you want to have kosher marshmallows? What's the problem with gelatin? You've heard. Gelatin is a problem. You see one of the non-kosher ingredients in a product is gelatin. You don't eat it. Why can't you eat it? Why can't you eat it? It comes from bones or it comes from skins. Unless it's kosher gelatin. Lately they've been making kosher gelatin out of fish. So I'm going to tell you in a nutshell. Only in a nutshell. What?
And they do have those.
Yes. So I'm going to tell you in a nutshell what the problems of gelatin is, who was lenient and who was machmir. The Achiezer that we mentioned before, remember the Achiezer? Mm-hmm. Right? He was lenient in some situations, and Moshe Feinstein is machmir. Today, for the most part, the better hashgachas are machmir. We don't eat any product that is made from non. There's two kinds of kosher gelatin today that I know of. One is made out of fish, and one is made out of the real thing, beef bones, but they're kosher beef. Yeah, for the bones.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's kosher. But if it's from a nevela, it's a problem. Well, why is it a problem? The Rambam says that atzamos are not food. I mean, you're not over it. It's the Rabbanon. Yeah, but it's bottle. In a sense, it's bottle. You can be...
But it's also a different process.
No, wait a minute. Yeah, we're not done. Right? Besides being bottle, besides being bones, the processing of it has made even those that have lachluchis completely inedible. Gelatin is inedible. And gelatin is a very good ingredient. It's an important ingredient, by the way. It's very hard to duplicate. So this is great. And if it's completely not edible, what's the problem? Now, using it lechatchila, there shouldn't be a problem. We know one thing, that if something is completely not edible, for the most part, you can use it, unless it's also bad. No, whatever. What's the problem? It's almost gone through a process of the chemicals, not edible. And they make capsules from it. It's an issue whether with capsules, gel caps. It's a problem with certain ice creams and chocolates and all kinds of foodstuffs. So the problem is one of the problems is because if something becomes unedible and later becomes edible, okay? In other words, somehow you brought it back to life. Part of the problem is that the unedible part is only temporary. It eventually does become something that is useful. Not only useful, achshave is a problem. What's achshave in the surah? Achshave means that I consider this, I want this. I want to eat it. I want to have it in my food.
Different things. I want to have it in my food.
That's what I mean. But
doesn't mean that
it's not exactly edible. It's not exactly edible.
It's edible. You can consume it. But
it's right. It's not food, right? But because it's considered, I value it. I consider it. I will use it. It's a problem, especially if it's one of those ingredients that really is a stabilizer. And stabilizers are not. Yeah, and it's not. There's no. So bittul is a problem. You're not going to be mevatel. We're going to eventually see certain things are not. There's no bittul for. But achshave, or considering it or giving it any importance, is not so significant if it's betaruves. In some ways, but it's mixed with other things also. So there's pros and cons to what's happening here. Now with skins of pigs, the Rambam himself says that they are like the meat itself. So with skins, it may be more of a problem of the skin of a pig than with the bones. But with the bones, in reality, if they're completely unedible, completely made into dust, there shouldn't be a problem. There shouldn't be an issur. Yes, that's basically it. The bones itself are not usur really.
That's the Rambam.
Yeah, the Rambam says even the bones are not really usur. And here we take bones that are completely dry. There's no lachluchis, in case you are concerned with that. And you made it into dust. You dried it up, chemicals, so it's not edible. So in reality, there shouldn't be any isser. There shouldn't be any isser.
I'm not sure of the category.
All right.
It's not food.
Yeah.
It's not in the category of food.
And you know what? You can even use it with basar v'chalav.
In other words, it's a kosher bone. I use gelatin with challah. So
Like the rennet. If it would be a kosher rennet, would it be a problem? The problem with cheeses is it's not a kosher rennet from the intestines of the animal.
That's why it's a problem if it's...
No, but we're talking about basar b'chalav. There's no problem with basar b'chalav when something is completely dry. I even shared with you the mechaber about bones. You're not even the isser. So if you took something from the intestine completely dry, there's no problem. There's no even problem with basar b'chalav.
Does the mechaber rely on
one of the three. Rambam,
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
How does that, what's the sequence? Mechaber's relying
Rambam, the Rif, and the Rosh.
Rabbi Shimshon in this.
I know you're talking. I know. You asked me about this halacha here.
Yeah.
We're going back to the halacha. No, he's just following the Rosh, the tour. And Rabbeinu Shimshon. I mean, he knows he learned the whole sugya. He has various rishonim to rely
Are
on.
they thinking that, or is the Rosh?
No, the Rambam doesn't mention it. Here, there's no Rambam. Yeah, but I was talking. I gave you this example of the gelatin. That in reality, it is an issue today because of its significance in the food. But on the other hand, it's not an issue because it's completely dry. And that's why there's different opinions as to how to go about it. So if it comes to medications, and sometimes you can rely on those opinions that are lenient. But on regular food items, where it is a central ingredient, where it could have come from skins or of animals too, and because of the opinions that hold that it could be a problem, once it is restored in a sense to some value as a food, then that is why we are machmer. So we need to be machmer, as many points can say we should be. But there are situations where you can rely, if there's no other way to, shaloi derech achila, when you're taking medication, where it may be okay, maybe. But, the sugya of gelatin is related to this. What do you say about bones? What if they're dry? What if they're completely dust? Right. Totally not edible. But there's other issues, however, to consider, which Mr. Hashem will deal with perhaps later on.